Hello, gentle SINoALICE inhabitants. Yeah, we'll go SINoALICians. Aliceans. I don't know. We have to make something up. We gotta figure that word out. Hey, it's Spoot with Fort Misery Gaming. So we've got so I had a little bit of a hard drive explosion. My oldest hard drive is kind of partitioned and formatted itself to death. So I'm a little late on this one, but I would like to at least get something out so we have it. So today we're going to be talking about grid swapping. This was just released in global. Japan has had it for a couple of years and has more options to it, but we're not. I will go over some of those things briefly, but I don't really want to get in depth with it too much right now because it doesn't matter to us right now. So what is grid swapping? You have the requirements, as per SINoALICE and POKELABO, are you have to have 100,000 grid, or 100,000 point set. So as long as you're over 100K, you're fine. And then you will assign a subset to be your one to swap. Eventually, and here's the caveat, JP gets, I think, 3 swaps per match. Right now, we only have 1. So there are different rules and different tips that you can kind of do. So some people use them as this image sort of says to swap for demons. Flex grids are more used for this. So it really depends on your guild lineup, and that doesn't really matter all the time because most of the time you're not going to give an absolute crap about what demon it is unless you're trying to win it. And that's really more of a rear guard thing than a vanguard thing, although it can be a vanguard problem. So eventually, and here are the future pieces, you get nightmares that can force people into different grids. You get nightmares that can lock grid swapping, that can change the timing of grid swapping. So here's how it works to do a grid swap. You have to be at your reload button at the end of your weapon grid. So you have to have used all of your weapons. And you go into menu and you hit grid swap. It costs 40 SP to do this. I believe it's 40 SP. I'm relatively sure. That's really it. So most people don't know the mechanic of it. That's the mechanic. You have to use all your weapons. You don't hit the reload button. You go into menu. You hit grid swap. It is very easy to just accidentally go into reload because it's really reflex at this point. Most people just do that. So keep that in mind. Everybody's been playing with it for a little bit, so I'm just reminding people that may not necessarily have it down, and if there are any esoteric, stuff that you're not sure of, this is it. Now, the big deals are this. For the majority of the time, right now, people are using combo grids first and swapping into damage grids second. What this means is that people with the combo weapons, the Halua head, the sword, the bow, the axe, etc., anybody with those, you use those first until you hit 1,000 combo, and then you swap off into your main damage dealing grid. That's primarily for vanguards, although rear guards, if you have a Halua head, you can do that too. Honestly, you'll see a lot of rear guards swap into a vanguard class that has a combo weapon. So there are a lot of benefits to it, but combo gridding is really the way that a lot of guilds are starting out. Some of you in Grand Kalo noticed that your opposing guild would be at 1,000 or 1,200 combo by the 13-minute mark or the 10-minute mark or sooner, while you were probably still barely scraping around at the 500 or 600 mark. Combo is directly related to damage. The higher your combo, the more damage you deal, and that starts to really peak around 1,000 to 1,100. There's math on it. I'm not going over it in this, but there is a formula for how it affects. Combo directly affects your damage and how things are done in the game, including how your stats are affected. So, what do we know about the future? Eventually, right now, you can only grid swap once. So you definitely don't want to do it accidentally, and you want to make sure your main grid has exactly what you need. If your main grid is your combo grid, make sure your subgrid has, your builds. Eventually, we will get the Sin classes, which are the elemental classes, and things get a little weirder there because you can build all fire and then go in on a fire nightmare, or you can go all water and do that, etc., etc. There are there are counter elemental grids eventually, stuff like that, because you can weaken one element and raise the other, or any real amount of these. There are a lot of high-end things. Like with Sorks right now, a lot of them are building an attack down and a defense down. So in the very beginning, you can figure out what team you're going up against and figure out which of the two grids you need to lock into. Minstrels don't have as big a time with this. It's more for... You always want a Sork grid if you can build one. I think that's a big thing. Like, I think overall it's sort of important to have. So the big deal being is that you kind of have to be aware of what your guild's necessities and needs are. So like Agony, for example, like Fort's main guild. The big thing that they do is that they have nothing but combo grids, or they have nothing but single elemental flex grids, or 2 elemental flex grids. It doesn't really matter, but most of the flex grids tend to lean more one color anyway. That's not really by design, it's just accident at this point because it's just how it runs. And this isn't always gospel, don't take it as such. So the big deal between these is that you have to be a little lenient. So swapping for demons is good if, like, you guys don't really want the first demon, you can ignore it, you can build combo, you can keep going. And if you really want the second demon, you would make sure you have a swap ready for that. You're going to see a lot of flex gridding in vanguards. In rear guards, it's mostly combos, and Sorks can swap between attack and defense down. Defense down is still king. Like, don't get me, don't misunderstand that. Like, having your enemy take more damage is still more important than how much damage they are doing, because it's a race to see who can down the other first. So while your Sorks having attack downs are also a secondary concern and mildly important, not nearly as important as making sure they take as much damage as humanly possible. That's how you farm life force. If you can hit them and they don't go down and they get healed and you can hit them, it's just the same circle of you getting life force over and over and over. Because that's what farming is at the end of the day. You don't want to boat them. You just want to you want them to build as much life force as possible. So when you do boat them, you actually get something. So you're not fighting for, $5 grand here or there. You actually want big 6-digit number swaps. So let's swap off of this. So in the game, you select your subset here. So we'll go back to the main screen just to show you. So there's my girl. So I just have a farm set for camp going on. So you go down here to select subset, and you select that as your subset. That becomes your option when you are changing gears, and it gives it a little icon. You can see it down here beside main. So that's it. It's really easy to do. And like, you can build whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Like, you can have a couple of options depending on what you're doing. I don't even think I can really make a crazy looking... Yeah, see, like, my instruments are so strong that it doesn't even matter. So we'll just get rid of that one. And you can copy sets so that you can have something similar and then just swap to them. Like for minstrels, generally you want your attack maxed out, so you do want a primarily attack focused grid, because obviously you want your guys to do more damage. That's the trick, right? It's not too bad. It's pretty easy to do. The big deal being you can want a Sork grid as a minstrel. You do want the option of being able to, if their minstrels aren't very powerful, keeping them in blue is almost always better than making sure your guys are at 20. Just because it's exponential across the board once they start hitting -5s. So always an option. Keep an eye on it. I do have a video sort of accenting. So this is from Fort, and he recorded it during Grand Calo for me. But that's the mechanic for subset. Like, it's very easy to do. You can set them. There are a lot of options. Right now, primarily what people are doing are making 3 or 4 weapon combo grids and just sort of letting them ride so you can get combo up as quickly as possible. This is still true in JP for the most part, but JP has more ways of messing with people's grids than we do currently. Like I said, there are forced grid swaps at Nightmares eventually. There are things that can lock grid swaps, so you can't do it for X amount of time. So you can kind of plan around getting whacked before a demon shows up, or pre or post demon, or there's all sorts of crazy ways that you can really use grid swapping to play, essentially, especially once we get Sin classes and you start seeing like actual elemental dominance. Like you'll summon 3 or 4 elemental nightmares in a row that only give you maybe 20 or 30%, but when your elemental attacks are all 20 or 30% higher than normal, you're doing significantly more damage across the board. So that is pretty much it for grid swapping. Let me key the... There we go. All right, so this is the middle of the match. They're at about the 8-minute mark against Insomniacs. So you'll see down here, Fort is using his very last weapon in the grid. He has more than 40 left. And actually, I'm going to play back. I'm going to slow this a little bit, too. We'll do it. Yeah, that should be good. All right, so we're going to go to 22. So he uses his 1. He's got to revive because he got dunked. He hits menu. He has his Kalo set, which is his half nightmare set. And then, boop! He suddenly swaps into a completely different human being. And that's it. So it costs 40 SP. You have to use all your weapons. You have to be at the end of your weapon grid. You can't hit reload. You have to go into the button. So you'll notice it's over here. Change gear set. Right there. And that's it. That's the whole shebang. There's less to think of in Global right now because it's not as big a game. We don't have as many options for toying with grid swaps as JP does. But eventually we will get there. And we'll probably end up making another video of tactics you can kind of do. Right now, combo is going to be the thing, and flex grids and Vanguard are going to be the things you see the most. Like, the highest combo almost always wins, and the faster you get there, the better. So keep it in mind. If you guys have any tips, or if anything you've seen that's kind of cute or interesting that you would want to see in a combo grid, or you have seen in a combo grid, leave it in the comments. Let's actually talk about it. Because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with grid swaps, and as the game gets further in, the more we will see. So like, comment, subscribe, make sure you guys keep up with us, and everybody be good.